We left off last video getting the general navigation structure in our tab bar in place for our app. In this video, we're going to kind of take a little detour and talk about the app lifecycle that is new in iOS 14 and with SwiftUI. Now, if you're coming from UIKit, you're probably used to the app delegate and the scene delegate that was introduced in iOS 13. But in the app delegate did finish launching with options, that kind of stuff. You had to run some code there. Well, that's not here, as you can see on the screen. Like, we have a much simpler implementation. Now, in UIKit, app delegate, scene delegate, that was the entry point for your app. That's where your program started. Well, how do we know how to do that in SwiftUI? Well, that's where this main keyword comes in, right? The main keyword acts as your entry point into your program. Now, there's a function that has to be ran when you use the main keyword. It's a main function, and you don't see that anywhere in here. Well, it's kind of hidden away by conforming to app, right? You've been used to seeing us conform to view, right? Our structs are conforming to view. Well, let's dig into app and see what that is. So I'm going to click on app to jump to definition. Well, you can see it's a scene representing the content of the app, right? And scenes were introduced in iOS 13. Real quickly, a scene is what shows up and allows you to have multiple windows, right? And a big part of SwiftUI is being good on iPad, macOS, where there's multiple windows. Whereas if you're only on iOS, you just have one window to worry about. That's your app. But that's why scene delegate was introduced in iOS 13. And this is kind of, replacing the scene delegate, right? So like I said, the body of an app conforms or returns a scene, right? Again, we're used to the body of our view returning some view. Well, now we need to return a scene, which is again, the window of our app. And if I keep scrolling down, you can see our body is a scene builder, right? We discussed view builders, how the view builder, constructed a view is pretty limited. It wasn't a typical, you can't just write any Swift code in there. Very similar concept, except now this returns a scene, and it builds a scene. But we talked about that main keyword and how it required the main function. Well, you see the extension on app here. This is where this public static func main is, right? And let's actually copy and paste this URL and take a look here in the Swift guide. And I hope you're getting a little taste of how I kind of explore and develop. Don't get me wrong. I do a ton of tutorials, YouTube videos, articles, definitely. But when I want to dive deeper while I'm coding, I just, command click into something, look at the definition, read about it. I'll make this bigger so we can see it here. So again, here's main, right? Apply this attribute to a structure, class, or enum declaration to indicate that it contains the top level entry point for a program flow. The type must provide a main type function that doesn't take any arguments and returns void. So if we go back to Xcode, that's what's going on here. The extension on the app protocol has the static function main. So that's how our program gets started, right? We conform to app. The app returns a scene, right? Again, you're used to body some view. Well, now we're doing body some scene. The scene is just like the window of your app, and it's different from the old app delegate because you can have multiple instances of the same app. Whether on macOS or iPadOS, right? You can have that multi-window. Not really on the iPhone yet. Maybe that'll come someday. But if you're doing iPad or Mac, you got to be familiar with scenes. And then the final piece of the puzzle in this basic kind of implementation is the window group. So again, we'll command click. Now you can command click to jump to definition to see what we just did. Or if you want a more nice kind of documentation, option click, and you get this little pop-up, which is nice. I typically like to open in developer documentation because it's bigger. So you can see a window group is a scene that presents a group of identically structured windows. Okay, that may be confusing, but the overview, let's read it here. Use a window group as a container for a view hierarchy presented by your app. The hierarchy that you declare here as the group's content serves as the template for each window that the app creates from that group. Right? So back in our example, anytime you open up a new appetizer app, like again, if you were opening this on the iPad and you opened up multiple instances of it, or again, macOS, you opened up multiple windows, every one of those windows is going to be initialized with our appetizer tab view, right? So what you're setting up in the window group is what opens up when a window of your app opens. Hopefully that wasn't confusing. But in our case, we want to show the appetizer tab view. And again, that is kind of how our whole app is structured. That holds all our views, etc. So again, that's just the simple basic implementation. Again, the main foundational knowledge that you should know. Of course, this topic can expand, right? If you remember the whole did enter background, will enter foreground, did become active, deep linking. This can get pretty complex. There's a lot that can go on here. But again, for foundational knowledge, knowing how the app is structured, how it builds a scene, has a window group, how it, main is your entry point. Again, that's the foundational knowledge you should know. If you want to build on that, I'll link to some resources below. All right, in the next video, we're gonna start building our data model for our appetizer object so we can start building out this appetizer list view that you see here, and then eventually connect it all up with a network call. So let's keep this thing moving.